Air India Flight 182, a devastating act of terrorism. On June 23, 1985, Air India Flight 182, operating on the Montreal, London, Delhi, Mumbai route, was tragically destroyed mid-flight over the Atlantic Ocean. The cause? A bomb planted by Canadian Khalistani terrorists. The Boeing 747-237B, registered VT-EFO, was cruising at 31,000 feet when an explosion ripped through the aircraft, leading to its disintegration. The wreckage fell into the ocean about 190 kilometers, 120 miles, off the coast of Ireland, claiming the lives of all 329 people on board, 268 Canadian citizens, 27 British citizens, and 22 Indian citizens. This attack remains the deadliest terrorist act in Canadian history, the worst aviation disaster involving Air India, and the most lethal act of aviation terrorism until the 9/11 attacks in 2001. The mastermind and the motive. The bombing was orchestrated by Sikh separatists linked to Babar Khalsa, a militant group advocating for an independent Sikh state called Khalistan. Investigators identified Inderjit Singh Riyat, a British-Canadian citizen, as the key bomb maker. He later pleaded guilty to manslaughter in 2003. Another primary suspect, Talwinder Singh Parmar, a Canadian Sikh separatist leader, was believed to have played a crucial role but was never convicted. Despite multiple arrests and trials, Riyat was the only individual ever convicted in connection to the bombing. The attack was meticulously planned. Babar Khalsa operatives devised a plot that involved planting bombs in checked luggage on two separate flights, one targeting Air India Flight 182 and another aimed at Air India Flight 301, which was scheduled to fly from Tokyo to Bangkok. The latter bomb exploded prematurely at Narita Airport, killing two baggage handlers, but sparing the passengers aboard the aircraft. A tragic security failure. Despite warnings from Indian intelligence and SIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, security measures failed to prevent the attack. Air India had requested extra security screenings, but on that fateful day, the X-ray machine at Toronto Pearson International Airport malfunctioned, forcing security staff to rely on a portable explosive sniffer. The device beeped faintly while scanning one of the suspect's suitcases, but because no standard operating procedure was in place for such a response, the bag was cleared for loading. The explosion and crash. At 7:14 Universal Time Coordinated, while flying over the Atlantic Ocean, an explosion detonated in the cargo hold of Flight 182. The blast caused an immediate decompression, leading to catastrophic structural failure. The aircraft broke apart in mid-air, plunging into the ocean. No distress call was made. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. By 9:13 Universal Time Coordinated, cargo ships in the area began discovering floating debris and bodies. Only 132 bodies were ever recovered. The remaining 197 were lost at sea. Many of the recovered bodies showed signs of hypoxia and explosive decompression, confirming that the aircraft had disintegrated before impact. The investigation, a long and painful road. The subsequent investigation and legal proceedings spanned nearly 2 decades, costing the Canadian government over 130 million Canadian dollars. Despite substantial evidence and multiple arrests, only one person, Inderjit Singh Riyat, was convicted. He served time for manslaughter and perjury but never fully disclosed details of the plot. 2 other suspects, Ripudman Singh Malik and Ajaib Singh Bugri, were charged in 2000 but were acquitted in 2005 due to insufficient evidence, destroyed evidence, and missed warnings. The case was further complicated by a series of failures on the part of Canadian intelligence and law enforcement agencies. Hundreds of wiretap recordings of the suspects were inexplicably erased by SIS, rendering them inadmissible in court. These lost recordings could have provided crucial evidence in the trial. Additionally, Canadian authorities were warned multiple times about potential terrorist threats to Air India. Intelligence reports even mentioned the use of time delay devices, yet no significant preventive action was taken. Memorials and legacy. The attack left a permanent scar on the families of the victims and the broader Indo-Canadian community. Memorials were erected in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Ottawa to honor those who lost their lives. In Ahakista, Ireland, a memorial site overlooks the ocean where Flight 182 went down, serving as a solemn reminder of the tragedy. Despite being one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in aviation history, public awareness of Air India Flight 182 has remained surprisingly low, particularly among younger generations in Canada. A 2023 study revealed that 9 out of 10 Canadians had little to no knowledge of the bombing, with many failing to recognize it as one of the country's worst acts of mass murder. A Canadian tragedy. For years, there was a misconception that the bombing was an Indian issue, rather than a Canadian tragedy. However, with 268 of the victims being Canadian citizens, the attack was undeniably an assault on Canada itself. In 2010, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper formally apologized for the failures that led to the attack, acknowledging that intelligence and law enforcement agencies had made grave mistakes. The search for justice. The Air India bombing remains an open wound in Canadian history. While Riyat was released on parole in 2016, many believe full justice was never served. The families of the victims continue to push for answers, accountability, and greater recognition of this tragedy in Canada's historical narrative. Air India Flight 182 was not just an attack on an airline. It was an attack on innocent civilians, on families, and on an entire nation. Even decades later, the echoes of that fateful day continue to resonate, a stark reminder of the horrors of terrorism and the cost of security failures.